The emergency lights turned the cabin red. Alarms screamed through the ship. Commander Alara Vance gripped her seat as the survey vessel shook like a toy in an angry child's hand. "Hull breach in sections 4 through 7, shouted Lieutenant Chun from the navigation console. His voice was barely audible over the chaos. "We're losing altitude fast." Alara tried to reach the controls, but the ship rolled hard to the left. She slammed against the wall. Pain exploded through her shoulder. Through the cracked viewport, she saw green and brown rushing up to meet them. Trees. Impossibly tall trees that seemed to twist and move like living things. "Brace for impact," she screamed. Then everything went black. When Alara opened her eyes, she was lying in dirt. Wet, dark dirt that smelled like copper and rotting leaves. Her head pounded. Her left arm hung at a wrong angle. Above her, through gaps in the forest canopy, she could see an amber sky turning purple as 2 suns began to set. 2 suns. This was wrong. This was all wrong. She pushed herself up with her good arm and looked around. Pieces of the meridian were scattered everywhere. Metal hull plating hung from branches. Cables dangled like dead snakes. A fire burned somewhere to her left, sending black smoke into the alien sky. "Chun?" she called out. Her voice was weak. "Martinez? Anyone?" No answer came. Only the sound of the wind moving through leaves that shimmered with colors that should not exist on any tree. Alara forced herself to stand. Her legs shook beneath her. She had to find the others. She had to find supplies. She had to understand where she was and how to get off this planet. She found Chun first. He was still strapped in his chair, which had been thrown 50 meters from the main wreckage. His neck was broken. His eyes stared at nothing. Alara closed them gently and whispered a prayer she half-remembered from childhood. She found 3 more bodies in the next hour. Then 2 more. By the time the first sun had fully set, she had counted 8 dead crew members. 4 were still missing. Maybe they had survived. Maybe they had been thrown even further. Or maybe something had taken them. That thought made her stop moving. She stood very still and listened. The forest was not quiet. It was full of sounds. Clicks and whistles and deep rumbling noises that seemed to come from the ground itself. Shadows moved between the twisted trees. Eyes reflected the dying light of the second sun. Many eyes. Too many eyes. Alara's training took over. She needed shelter. She needed it now. She ran back toward the largest piece of wreckage. It was the cargo section, split open like a broken egg. Inside, she found emergency supplies scattered among broken containers. A med kit, water purification tablets, 3 days of ration bars, a multi-tool with a flickering charge, a thermal blanket, an emergency beacon that was completely dead. She grabbed everything she could carry and climbed inside a large storage container that had stayed mostly intact. She pulled the thermal blanket over herself, not for warmth, but to hide her heat signature. She had no idea what hunted in this forest, but she knew that many predators on many worlds tracked their prey by body heat. The second sunset. True darkness came, and with it came the sounds. Something large moved through the wreckage outside. Alara heard metal scraping against metal. She heard sniffing. Deep, wet sniffing. Then she heard a growl that made her bones vibrate. She held her breath. She did not move. She did not even blink. The sniffing came closer. She could see nothing in the absolute darkness, but she could hear claws clicking on the cargo container's floor. The creature was inside the wreckage now. It was meters away from her. A long moment passed. Then another. Then the creature moved away. Its footsteps grew distant. Other sounds replaced it. Screaming sounds. Tearing sounds. The creature had found one of her dead crew members. Alara closed her eyes and covered her ears. She stayed like that until morning dawned. When light finally returned, she crawled out of her container. The camp was destroyed. Whatever had come in the night had torn through everything, scattering supplies and dragging away two of the bodies she had found. Deep claw marks covered the metal hull pieces. They were as wide as her hand. Alara looked at the marks for a long time. Then she looked at the forest around her. Then she looked at the small pile of supplies she had managed to save. This was her situation. She was alone on an unknown world. She had almost no food, almost no water, and no way to call for help. The forest was filled with creatures that wanted to eat her. She had a broken arm that she would need to set herself using the medkit. She had no weapons except a small utility knife. Most people would have given up. Most people would have sat down and waited for death. The math was simple. She could not survive here. No one could survive here. But Ilar Vance was not most people. She had grown up on a mining colony on Europa. She had survived a reactor meltdown at age 12. She had worked her way through the academy while supporting her sick mother. She had been told she was not good enough, not smart enough, not strong enough 1,000 times. She had proven them wrong every single time. This forest did not know who it was dealing with. She sat down on a piece of whole metal and opened the medkit. She found painkillers and swallowed 2 of them dry. Then she found the bone-setting supplies. This was going to hurt. This was going to hurt more than anything had ever hurt before. She put a piece of leather from her boot between her teeth. She gripped her broken arm. She pulled. The scream that came out of her scared birds from the trees 1/2 kilometer away. But when it was over, her arm was straight. She wrapped it tight with bandages and made a sling from torn cloth. Then she stood up and looked at the forest. "Okay," she said out loud. Her voice was rough from screaming. "Okay, let's see what you've got." She did not know it then, but those words marked the beginning of something remarkable. Something that would change not just her life, but the future of 2 species. For now, though, she simply picked up her supplies and started walking. She needed to find water. She needed to find food. She needed to learn everything about this place that wanted her dead. And she needed to build something better than a container to hide in. The forest watched to go. It had killed many things. It had broken many creatures. It did not yet understand that this small, soft, wounded creature was different. It would learn. The first week on the planet tried to kill Alara 7 times. The first attempt came on day 2. She had found a stream and was about to drink from it when she noticed dead animals along the bank. Small 6-legged creatures lay everywhere, their bodies bloated and wrong. The water was poison. She had almost put it to her lips. The second attempt came hours later. She picked a fruit that looked safe. It was bright orange and smelled sweet. She took 1 small bite just to test it. Within minutes, her vision blurred. Her heart raced. She vomited until there was nothing left inside her. She lay on the forest floor for 6 hours, certain she was dying. But her body fought the poison. She survived. The third attempt was the creature she would later call a reaver. She was building a small shelter in a hollow between 2 massive tree roots when she heard movement behind her. She turned and saw it standing 10 meters away. It was as tall as a horse but built like a nightmare. 6 legs, gray skin that seemed to shift and change. A head that was mostly mouth, filled with teeth that curved backward like hooks. 4 eyes that reflected no light. It watched her. She watched it. Then it charged. Alara ran. She ran faster than she had ever run in her life. She could hear the thing behind her, its claws tearing up the ground. She could feel its breath on her neck. She was going to die. She was certain of it. Then she saw the gap. 2 fallen trees had created a narrow space between them. Too narrow for something that big. She dove through without thinking. She felt bark tear her skin. She felt her wounded arm scream in pain. But she made it through. The reaver crashed into the trees. It could not fit. It screamed in frustration, a sound that seemed to shake the air itself. It clawed at the wood, trying to reach her. But the gap was too small. Alara crawled away, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Behind her, the reaver eventually gave up and moved away, looking for easier prey. She had learned her first lesson about survival on this world. She was slow and weak compared to the predators. But she was small. She could fit places they could not. She needed to use that dot over the following days. She learned more lessons. Each one could have killed her. Each one made her stronger. She learned that the reavers hunted by vibration and heat. If she moved slowly and kept her body temperature low, they often passed right by her. She found mud near a hot spring that smelled terrible but blocked her heat from their senses. She covered herself in it whenever she traveled. She learned that certain plants glowed blue at night. These plants were poisonous to eat, but they also seemed to repel the smaller predators. She started marking her paths with them. She learned that the water could be made safe. She built a filter from sand and charcoal and hollow reeds. It took her 3 days to figure out the right combination. The first batch still made her sick. The second batch was better. The third batch was clean enough to drink without pain. She learned which creatures she could eat. There were small flying things with 6 wings that she called scuttlers. They tasted bad, but they did not poison her. She learned to trap them using the glowing spores that floated through the air as bait. The scuttlers loved the spores. They would walk right into her simple stick traps to get them. 2 weeks passed. Alara's shelter evolved from a hole in the ground to something more. She found that the bark of certain trees could be woven together like cloth. She found that the sap from another tree hardened like plastic when it dried. She started building walls. She started building a roof. She worked from first light to last light. Her hands bled. Her arm ached constantly. She was always hungry, always tired, always afraid. But she did not stop. The forest had a pattern. Everything in nature had a pattern. She just needed to find it. She started watching the reavers from safe distances. She climbed high into the trees where they could not reach her and observed them for hours. She learned that they were territorial. They patrolled the same areas at the same times. They did not like to cross certain boundaries that seemed invisible to her eyes. She mapped their territories in the dirt. She found the gaps. She found the safe paths between hunting grounds. She could now travel through large sections of the forest without ever crossing into reaver territory. She started making tools. A multi-tool was dying, its charge almost gone. She needed alternatives. She found stones that could be shaped into blades. She found vines that could be woven into rope. She found bones from dead animals that could be carved into needles and hooks. Each tool was rough and ugly. Each tool worked. By the end of the first month, Alara had something she had not had since the crash. She had hoped. Her shelter now had 4 walls and a roof. It had a fire pit in the center, lined with stones that she had carried from a riverbed 2 kilometers away. She had discovered that the local wood burned hot and slow. She had discovered that adding certain blue minerals to the fire made the flames burn brighter and longer. She had food stored. Dried scuttler meat hung from the ceiling. Roots that she had learned were safe set in containers she had made from tree bark. She had water stored in shells from creatures she had killed and cleaned. She was no longer just surviving. She was living, but she was not satisfied. The shelter was good, but it was still just one small space in a hostile world. One bad storm could destroy it. One determined reaver could break through the walls. She needed more. She needed to expand. She needed to create something bigger, something stronger. She needed to stop hiding from this world and start controlling it. On the 35th day, she climbed the tallest tree near her shelter. It took her 2 hours to reach the top. When she got there, she looked out over the forest. It stretched to every horizon. Endless twisted trees. Endless danger. Endless chaos. But within that chaos, she saw opportunity. She saw rivers that could provide water. She saw clearings that could become farms. She saw high ground that could become defensive positions. She saw a kingdom waiting to be built. "All right," she said to the forest. "Let's get to work." She climbed down and started planning. She would need more tools. She would need better weapons. She would need to understand this world even better than she already did. She would need to become something more than a survivor. She would need to become a conqueror. 3 months after the crash, Alara stood at the edge of her territory and watched a reaver run away from her. Not toward her. Away. The creature had come too close to her boundary line. It had triggered one of her traps. A wall of thorn vines, coated in the poison she had extracted from a plant with red leaves, had swung down from the trees. The thorns had cut the reaver's face. The poison had burned its eyes. The reaver had screamed and fled. It would not come back. They never came back once they learned what waited for them inside her domain. Alara smiled. It was a hard smile, nothing like the smiles she used to wear on Earth. This smile belonged to someone who had fought for every breath, every meal, every safe night of sleep. Her territory now covered nearly 2 square kilometers. It had taken her weeks of brutal work to establish it. She had built barriers on every approach, walls of sharpened stakes, pits covered with thin branches, trip wires connected to noisemakers that warned her when something crossed the boundary. Inside the territory, she had created a network of structures. The original shelter had become her main base, expanded 3 times and reinforced with stronger materials. But she had also built smaller stations throughout her domain. Supply caches, observation platforms high in the trees, safe rooms she could run to if something broke through her defenses. She had built rope bridges between the trees, letting her move through the canopy without ever touching the ground. She had cleared paths through the undergrowth so she could travel quickly. She had marked every landmark, every danger zone, every resource location. She knew this part of the forest better than anything had ever known it. The creatures were learning to avoid her. Not just the reavers. Every predator in the area had learned that the territory with the Tadiri, with the fire smell and the strange barriers, was not worth entering. Easier prey existed elsewhere. Whatever lived inside those boundaries was too dangerous to hunt. Alara had become an apex predator, not through strength or speed or natural weapons, through intelligence, through planning, through an absolute refusal to accept the rules the forest tried to impose on her. She had also started to change the land itself. Near her main shelter, she had created a small farm. She had dug up the edible roots she had discovered and replanted them in organized rows. She had built channels that directed water from a nearby stream to her plants. She had covered the plants with woven screens that protected them from the acid rain that sometimes fell. The farm was small. It produced only a fraction of the food she needed. But it was hers. She had taken a piece of this chaotic world and made it ordered, made it productive, made it serve her needs. Instead of trying to kill her, she was not done. She had found a cave system in the hills at the edge of her territory. Inside, she had discovered minerals that burned with different colored flames. Blue minerals made fire burn longer. Red minerals made it burn hotter. Yellow minerals created smoke that drove away insects and small predators. She started mining these minerals and storing them. She did not know all their uses yet, but she knew they were valuable. Everything on this planet had a use if she was smart enough to find it. She had also started working on her Rescue beacon? The original beacon had been destroyed in the crash, but she had found pieces of it scattered through the wreckage. She had found other electronics too. Broken, damaged, but not completely useless. Every day, after her other work was done, she spent an hour trying to put the beacon back together. It was slow progress. She was an explorer, not an engineer. But she understood basic electronics. She understood power systems. Piece by piece, connection by connection, she was rebuilding the device that might someday bring rescue. On the 93rd day, something strange happened. Alara was checking her boundary traps when she noticed movement in the trees. Not animal movement. Something different. Something careful and deliberate. She froze. Her hand moved to the spear she always carried now. It was a beautiful weapon, carved from the hardest wood she had found, tipped with a blade she had made from hull metal. She had killed 3 reavers with it. The movement came again. High in the branches, something was watching her. She looked up, straining to see through the leaves and vines. For a moment, she saw nothing. Then the shadow shifted, and she saw it. Eyes. Large, compound eyes that reflected the amber sunlight. A long, thin body covered in what looked like natural armor. 4 arms, 2 legs. A head that tilted to the side, and a gesture that seemed almost curious. It was not a reaver. It was not any creature she had seen before. It was watching her the way she watched the animals in the forest. With intelligence. With interest. With calculation. Alara did not move. She did not raise her spear. Something told her that this creature was not hunting. It was studying. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then the creature made a sound. It was not a growl or a screech. It was almost musical. A series of clicks and whistles that rose and fell like a question. Then it was gone. It moved through the canopy so fast she could barely track it. One moment it was there, and the next it had vanished into the forest. Alara stood very still for a long time. After it left, she had assumed she was alone on this planet. Alone except for the animals, the predators, the mindless dangers that wanted her dead. But that creature had not been mindless. That creature had looked at her with something she recognized. Intelligence. She was not alone. Something else lived in this forest. Something that thought. Something that watched. And it had been watching her for who knew how long. That night, she sat by her fire and thought about what she had seen. She thought about the creature's eyes. She thought about the sound it had made. She thought about the way it had moved through the trees. She had built her territory to protect herself from predators. But what if there was something else out there? Something that could not be stopped by walls and traps and poison thorns? What if this forest had secrets she had not even begun to understand? She looked out into the darkness beyond her firelight. Somewhere out there, eyes might be watching her right now. "Who are you?" She whispered into the night. The forest did not answer. But she knew, somehow, that it had heard her. And she knew that sooner or later, she would find out what was watching. The creatures came back 3 more times over the following weeks. Each time, Alara caught only brief glimpses. A shadow moving through the canopy. Eyes reflecting firelight from beyond her boundary. The soft musical sounds that seemed to carry meaning she could not understand. She started leaving things at the edge of her territory. Small offerings. A piece of dried meat. A carved wooden figure. A stone that she had polished until it shone. She did not know if these gifts meant anything to the watchers, but she wanted them to know that she was aware of them, that she was not afraid, that she was willing to communicate. On the 105th day, one of the creatures finally came close. Alara was working on her water channel when she heard the musical clicking sound directly behind her. She turned slowly, keeping her hands visible, keeping her movements calm. The creature stood 5 meters away. In full daylight, She could see it clearly for the first time. It was tall. Taller than her by at least half a meter. Its body was thin and covered in natural armor that shifted colors as she watched. Green became brown, became gray, became green again. Its forearms ended in hands with 3 long fingers each. Its face was mostly eyes, huge compound structures that reflected the world in 1,000 tiny fragments. Below the eyes, a small mouth opened and closed as it made its clicking sounds. It was beautiful. Strange and alien and beautiful. It carried something in 2 of its hands. A basket woven from vines. Inside the basket were fruits and roots that Alara did not recognize. The creature set the basket on the ground. Then it stepped back and waited. Alara understood. This was a gift. This was an answer to the offering she had left. She walked forward slowly and picked up the basket. She looked at the fruits inside, then looked at the creature. She pointed to herself. "Alara," she said. The creature tilted its head. Its colors shifted rapidly. Then it pointed to itself and made a series of sounds. Clicks and whistles and something that sounded almost like singing. She could not repeat those sounds. But she tried anyway. The result was rough and probably wrong. But the creature's colors shifted to something that might have been amusement. It made the sounds again, slower this time. They stood there for an hour, exchanging sounds and gestures. Alara learned that the creature's species called themselves something that sounded like Vethari. She learned that they lived throughout the forest, in communities hidden so well that she had never noticed them. She learned that they had been watching her since the day she crashed. She also learned why the Vethari had seen her kind before. Ships had crashed on this world throughout their long history. The Vethari had watched the survivors struggle. They had watched them fail. They had watched them die, one by one, unable to survive in a world that was too dangerous, too chaotic, too different from whatever place they had come from. The Vethari had expected Alara to die too. In the first week. Maybe the second. Soft creatures like her always died. But she had not died. She had adapted. She had built. She had taken the chaos of the forest and turned it into something ordered. Something controlled. She had done in months what the Vethari had needed thousands of generations to learn. They were curious. They were impressed. And Alara suspected from the way their colors shifted when they looked at her constructions. They were a little frightened. Over the following weeks, more Vethari came to visit. They brought gifts, food that was safe to eat, materials that were useful for building, knowledge about the forest that Alara had never discovered on her own. In return, she showed them her world. She showed them fire. The Vethari had seen fire before, in lightning strikes and volcanic events, but they had never controlled it. They watched with shifting colors as she built a fire pit and made flames appear from nothing more than sticks and dried leaves. They watched her cook food, forge tools, and use fire to harden wood and shape metal. She showed them tools. The Vethari used simple instruments, things found in nature and barely modified. Alara showed them how to shape stone into blades, how to weave rope that was stronger than any natural vine, how to build structures that stood against storms and predators. She showed them her farm. The idea of cultivating plants, of forcing the forest to grow what you wanted instead of what it chose, was completely new to them. They had always moved through the forest, taking what it offered, flowing with its chaos. The idea of imposing order on nature was alien to their entire way of thinking. They were fascinated. And they were confused. One Vethari, an elder whose colors had faded to soft gray and silver, came to speak with Alara many times. Through their slow, difficult communication, the elder asked a question that Alara never forgot. "Why do you fight the forest?" The elder asked. The question took 20 minutes of gestures and sounds to convey. Why not flow with it? Why not accept what is? Alara thought about the question for a long time before answering. Because I refuse to accept that I cannot change things, she said. Because every problem has a solution. Because chaos is not permanent. It is just order that has not been created yet. The elder studied her with its ancient eyes. Its colors shifted through patterns she had never seen before. Your kind is very strange, the elder said finally. Very dangerous. You look at the world and see not what it is, but what it could become. Is that wrong? Alara asked. I do not know, the elder admitted. We have lived in this forest for time beyond counting. We have learned its ways. We have survived. But we have never built what you have built. We have never changed the world. We have only changed ourselves to fit it. The elder paused. Its colors settled into something calm and thoughtful. Perhaps there is more than one way to survive, it said. Perhaps your way and our way together could be something greater than either alone. Alara smiled. It was a real smile this time, warm and genuine. I would like that, she said. From that day forward, the Vethari and the human worked together. They taught each other. They shared knowledge. The Vethari showed Alara plants that could heal wounds, paths that were safe from predators, locations of resources she had never found. Alara showed them how to build, how to plan, how to look at a problem and break it into pieces that could be solved one by one. It was not always easy. They misunderstood each other constantly. Their ways of thinking were so different that sometimes communication seemed impossible. But they kept trying, because both sides had recognized something important. Alone, they could survive. Together, they could thrive. And somewhere in the back of Alara's shelter, a rescue beacon slowly came back to life, ready to signal to the stars that something remarkable had happened on this forgotten world. 1 year after the crash of the Meridian, a ship appeared in the amber sky. Alara saw it first as a bright point of light moving against the clouds. Then she heard the sound of engines, a sound she had almost forgotten after so many months of forest silence. She stood in the center of her settlement and watched the ship descend, her heart beating fast for the first time in weeks. The rescue beacon had worked. The ship was called the Avalon. It was a colonial survey vessel, larger than the Meridian had been. It landed in a clearing that Alara had created specifically for this purpose. She had always believed that rescue would come eventually. She had prepared for it. The ramp lowered. Armed soldiers came out first, their weapons raised, scanning the forest for threats. Behind them came a man in a captain's uniform. He was tall, with gray hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades in space. He stopped when he saw what waited for him. Alara stood at the head of a path that led from the clearing into the trees. Behind her, buildings rose among the twisted trunks. Walls of woven bark and salvaged metal. Roofs of hardened sap and broad leaves. Smoke rose from a central structure. Gardens grew in organized rows. Water flowed through channels she had dug with her own hands. And beyond the buildings, watching from the tree line, stood the Vethari. Dozens of them. Their colors shifted in patterns of curiosity and caution as they studied the newcomers. The captain stared. His soldiers stared. Nobody moved. Commander Vance? The captain finally said. His voice was uncertain. We received your emergency beacon. We came to rescue a survivor. Alara walked forward. She was not the same woman who had crawled from the wreckage of the Meridian 1 year ago. She was leaner now, harder. Her skin was weathered by alien suns. Scars marked her arms and face. She moved with the careful grace of someone who had learned to survive in a dangerous world. Captain, she said. Her voice was rough from months of speaking little. Thank you for coming. But as you can see, I've been doing more than just surviving. The captain looked at the settlement. He looked at the Vethari. He looked at Alara. How is this possible? He asked. Our scans showed this planet was Class 4 hostile. Nothing should be able to survive here without heavy equipment and fortified structures. You crashed with nothing. I crashed with something, Alara said. I crashed with this. She pointed to her head. Everything else I built. She led the captain and his team through the settlement. She showed them the main shelter, expanded into a proper building with multiple rooms. She showed them the food stores, filled with preserved meat and cultivated vegetables. She showed them the water system, clean and reliable. She showed them the workshop where she had repaired the beacon and built dozens of tools. She showed them the defensive perimeter, the rope bridges in the canopy, the observation posts, the safe rooms. She showed them the farm, the mine entrance, the paths she had cleared through the forest, and she introduced them to the Vethari. The elder came forward, its colors shifting to something that looked like formal greeting. Through Alara's translation, it spoke to the captain. Your small one fell from the sky, the elder said. We expected it to die. Instead, it built. It changed. It became something we had never seen before. The captain looked at Alara with new respect. You made first contact with an alien species, he said. You know what that means? In all of human history, we have never found intelligent life. Until now. Alara nodded. She had thought about this many times over the past months. The Vethari were the first. The first proof that humans were not alone in the universe. And she had found them not through exploration or science, but through survival. They call this place Kethvora, she said. It means something like where chaos became still. I've been calling it Haven. The captain's second in command, a young woman with sharp eyes, stepped forward. Commander, we have room on the Avalon. We can take you home. Back to Earth. Back to civilization. Home. The word felt strange in Alara's mind. She had not thought about Earth in months. It had become an abstract idea, a memory from another life. This place, this dangerous, beautiful, terrible, wonderful place, had become her reality. She looked at the settlement she had built. She looked at the Vethari, who had become her allies and friends. She looked at the forest that had tried so hard to kill her and failed. I am home, she said. The captain raised his eyebrows. You want to stay? On a Class 4 hostile world? It was hostile when I arrived, Alara said. It is not hostile anymore. Not to me. Not to anyone who learns to understand it. She turned to face the rescue team fully. Her eyes were bright with something that might have been passion or madness or vision. Captain, I have spent a year building this place. I have made peace with the beings who live here. I have learned secrets about this world that could change everything we know about survival, about adaptation, about what humans are capable of when we have no choice but to succeed. She gestured at the forest around them. There is an entire planet here. Resources we have never seen. Knowledge we have never imagined. And I have only explored a tiny fraction of it. I am not going to leave now. Not when there is so much more to do. The captain studied her for a long moment. Then a slow smile spread across his face. What do you need? He asked. Alara smiled back. Supplies, tools, medicine, seeds for crops that might grow here. And people. Volunteers who want to be part of something new. Something important. I think I can arrange that, the captain said. 2 months later, the first colonial shuttle landed in Haven. It carried 20 volunteers. Men and women who had heard about the woman who tamed a hostile world. It carried supplies that would have seemed like treasure to the Alara of 1 year ago. And it carried a new chapter for humanity. Alara stood at the edge of her settlement and watched the volunteers step off the shuttle. Behind her, the Vethari watched too, their colors shifting with curiosity and something that might have been hope. Welcome to Haven, she said. There is a lot of work to do. And there was building, learning, growing. The settlement expanded month by month, year by year. Humans and Vethari working together, combining the adaptability of one species with the wisdom of another, creating something that neither could have built alone. They called it Haven, but it was more than that. It was proof. Proof that humans could survive anything. Proof that chaos could become order. Proof that a single person, stranded far from home with nothing but her mind and her will, could transform disaster into opportunity. The Vethari had a new phrase now. They used it whenever they talked about humans. It translated roughly as thinking like the soft ones. It meant looking at the impossible and seeing only a problem to be solved. It meant refusing to accept defeat. Even when defeat was certain. It meant building a haven in the heart of chaos and never, ever giving up. Commander Ilara Vance had fallen from the sky into a dangerous forest. She had been alone, wounded, without supplies or hope, and she had turned that forest into home. That was the human way.